Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this session of the conference. It's the last session of the day, so we really appreciate you being here with us today. This is the National Industry Standards Update session. My name is Taylor Edwards. I'm a Community Development Analyst with ICF, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Similar to all the other sessions we had earlier today, participants will be in listen-only mode. For your chat, you can use the chat box. That's going to be to submit any technical issues. That's going to be if you're having, issues accessing things, or maybe any other things that are related to tech or Zoom. Please send a message to the host, and they'll be able to clear up any of those tech issues. As for the Q&A box, you can submit any content-related questions via the Q&A box. Please ensure that you send to the host, presenter, and panelists so that we can make sure we get your questions. As far as speakers today, once again, I am Taylor Edwards with ICF. We'll be joined by David Berenbaum, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the HUD Office of Housing Counseling. We'll also have Marietta Rodriguez, the President and CEO of NeighborWorks America. And then we'll also have my colleague from ICF, Shauna Morale, who is the director here. For the agenda today, we will cover the National Industry Standards, or NIS, orientation and overview. We'll then cover some of those NIS next steps. We will then gather information on Mentimeter, so make sure you have your Mentimeter handy. As we get closer to Mentimeter, we will drop those links for you to join. And then we'll close up this session, but also we'll wrap up the conference for today. So with that being said, I will pass over the presentation to David and Marietta to start us on our update to the National Industry Standards.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And hey, good afternoon, everyone. We are off to a great start today. The opening program, the state of the housing industry, some of the challenges that we're facing, the research that was presented, the tough discussions about some of the challenges to ensure fair appraisal, as well as the conversations looking at both at manufactured housing as well as aging in place and reverse mortgage was really just, I found it to be a very rewarding day as a whole. With me today, as you heard, is Marietta Rodriguez. Marietta, first, let me congratulate you. I had the pleasure of dropping in on the National Training Institute this year. It was a marvelous program. Great to see over, I think it was almost 1,800 people there in Chicago. Congratulations. What a great program it was.
Thanks so much, David.
So today we are talking about something that I think many of you know I am very excited about. Many years ago, when I first really became very active in the housing counseling discussions, NeighborWorks America led the establishment of national industry practices. And to this day, they have been a leader in really orchestrating what has been sort of a gold seal or a blue seal, a ribbon of approval for the housing counseling industry. And I'm really happy that today, in collaboration with NeighborWorks America, we are together announcing that we're beginning a comprehensive update of the National Industry Standards for Homeownership Education and Housing Counseling. Now, Marietta and I are going to have a wonderful conversation, but just quickly on background, the standards were originally released in 2007. And they were developed to support and ensure the delivery of high-quality housing counseling services. Now, our hope is, with the updated standards, that we will be able to incorporate what is happening today in our industry, whether it's new mortgage products, policies and practices and information, new technologies, as well as, quite candidly, the creation of our office and the certification requirements. But today, particularly during this session, you're going to have an opportunity to provide feedback directly to both NeighborWorks and the Office of Housing Counseling. And we're going to be working very closely with ICF Our role as the Office of Housing Counseling is simply to facilitate an industry discussion and provide technical assistance in our partnership lead role with NeighborWorks America. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the national industry standards, they're referenced in our HUD handbook. Now, I'm going to be citing our previous handbook, but it's section 7610.1 in chapter 3 to quote, HUD may require, promote, or incentivize the adoption of and implementation of housing counseling and education standards by participating agencies. These standards may include minimum acceptable counseling and education content and activities, training, and testing. These industry standards may be developed or implemented by HUD or by other entities that are endorsed by HUD. So we really would like industry to lead, and there's no one better to take a leadership role in this process than NeighborWorks America. So Marietta, to kick things off, could you shed a little bit more background on NAS and how the standards were developed and frankly, how they were updated over the years?
Of course. Well, David, thank you. And thank you and the HUD Office of Housing Counseling and your staff for inviting us to share in its 2023 community conference. We really appreciate the opportunity. It's wonderful to be part of this event, and that brings together both housing counselors, housing counseling agencies from across the country. I'm incredibly thankful for our strong partnership with the Office of Housing Counseling, particularly as we work together to provide resources and innovations to support the critical work that's going on the ground of housing counselors across the country. With home ownership remaining as one of the principal ways families in this country build wealth, housing counselors play a more critical role than ever before, particularly as we see the road to home ownership getting more difficult. And so I'm particularly excited to talk about our partnership with HUD to modernize the national industry standards. These updates will reflect today's challenges and opportunities, and hopefully provide a better support and direction for housing counselors across the country. We're proud to have led the convening of industry leaders that originally developed the housing industry, the national housing standards, national industry standards to date. This work began in 2004 when there was no HUD certification, there was no Office of Housing Counseling, and organizations were looking for guidance on how to stand up and prove quality homeownership and housing counseling was being delivered in communities. And in 2007, the first 2 sets of national industry standards in homeownership education and homeownership counseling were published in an effort to help standardize and promote high quality homeownership and counseling services. And they were developed in conjunction with housing counselors and the industry. And at that point, NeighborWorks was served as the convener and fiscal agent for the standards. But we were just one voice in their development and in the conversation. Over the years, the standards have been governed by a National Industry Standards Committee, which has included leading housing counseling agencies, HUD-approved housing counseling intermediaries, local housing agencies, banks, government agencies, representative from the GSEs, and other nonprofit partners. And each member brought their own expertise and experience and local perspective that really enriched the standards. And we're grateful to have all of these leaders who have helped build the roadmap for excellence in housing counseling. And NeighborWorks is proud to have served as one of these voices and custodians of the standards for all these years. But we also have to recognize that there have been profound changes in the industry since the 2 sets of standards were launched. Almost immediately after the establishment of those 2 original sets, the foreclosure crisis rocked our industry and our country. And in response, the committee worked rapidly in conjunction with other industry partners, and they launched the foreclosure intervention standards. Then in 2019, the standards expanded even further to provide a more holistic approach, education, counseling, and coaching to the launch of the national industry standards, and financial capability and rental housing counseling were added. I would say that since 2007, nearly 1,500 organizations have adopted at least one set of these standards. And agencies able to adopt the standards through the nearly 1,800 housing counselors who collectively held over 12,000 professional certifications. So we're proud of these collective accomplishments where we've gotten so far, but I do think it's time that we refine them once again in response to what's going on the market and what innovations the Office of Housing Counseling is bringing the industry. So, David, how has, since this effort predated the Office of Housing Counseling, predated the HUD certification exam, can you talk about, from your perspective, how HUD certification and the national industry standards work together or not, and how do they complement each other?
Oh, great question, Marietta. And let me also thank you for sharing the really important chronology of how all of the standards developed. And I actually believe that many of the standards influence some of the elected officials who, after the financial crisis, decided to stand up the Office of Housing Counseling. When we use the word, housing counselors as trusted advisors, that goes to the core of what the standards and the best practices have really stood for all of these years. But I think we also have to note that the communities and the industry, the communities that we serve and the industry that we work in has changed significantly in all of these years. There have been significant consumer protections in the affordable housing and fair lending and responsible lending field. As you note, the creation of the Office of Housing Counseling with its oversight of the housing counseling organizations, as well as its significant role in certification of counselors, were all really game changers in many ways. But most importantly, the environment that we're working in has really, really changed. Earlier today, when we opened the program, I spoke about elevating the profession of housing counseling, and I genuinely believe this is our moment. The work of housing counselors is being recognized by securitizers, by servicers, by originators, by realtors, and frankly, as well, by all aspects of all levels of government. And I'm really excited about HUD has played a very active role in broadening the role of housing counseling in all of our programs. And you can look for some further announcements along those lines in the near future. But essentially, the NIS has been a framework for the delivery of housing counseling. And that's distinguished from what I describe as the basic requirements. It plays to the noble role of what a housing counselor does. And what I'd also like to note as well, that as we're looking at the environment we're working in, even we have to update our own standards. Earlier, I mentioned that soon we'll be issuing a proposed rule looking at the delivery of housing counseling. And thank you again for all of the counseling community's feedback through our advisory committee and through our discussions. Looking at telephonic, virtual, looking at the use of internet, looking at face-to-face counseling, and a mix of all of those. So the time has come to really take a fresh look at the industry as it is today, and then celebrate our work with all of our partners. And Marietta, NeighborWorks, that's how it all kicked off. Probably more than anyone else how the counseling community has benefited from these standards. Could you share some examples or success stories with everyone?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of examples out there. We could probably spend all afternoon talking and elevating them. But I think some of them include the National Industry Standards has provided guidance to staff on criteria, really to ensure and to demonstrate to their partners that they are adhering to the highest levels of professionalism in terms of content and delivery. I think the NIS established consistencies in the way services are delivered. I think we use the term in the industry housing counseling as a catch-all, but we know as providers that there's a difference between counseling and education and then coaching. But I think in each of those areas, the NIS provided some guidance and consistencies. I think the NIS also elevated, frankly, the housing counseling industry's reputation and visibility for quality of service delivery. I mean, before we pulled that advisory committee together, the larger intermediaries were having conversations individually with those stakeholders, with the GSEs. And I think it was able to pull the voices together in a way that had never really happened before. So I think that was important. I think the industry standards on the consumer level helps build trust of customers and clients that are seeking these services, that their counseling agency follows standards that are nationally recognized. So I think that's important. And not most importantly, but most notably, I think that the standards also provided a level of credibility and trust with funders who had been providing support for housing counseling across the country. And so I think that's important to note. But really, the home buyer, the end customer, had a lot to gain. There was greater assurance that they were getting credible information, particularly during the foreclosure crisis when the scam activity was so prevalent in communities, and it was hard to determine a good actor from a bad actor. And so I think that was really important. I think it also established relationships with customers and housing counseling agencies. So once someone became a homeowner, if they got into trouble, they had a natural entry back to a housing counselor for assistance. And certainly the industry standards provided the ability to determine that, they were being served with competent and fair counselors, because there was a code of ethics and a code of conduct. And I think that had never been codified before. And customers, could ensure they were getting consistent and reliable information. I think the other thing is that counselors or educators were now equipped with tools that were more universal, that they could together inform and make them better. I mean, here's the thing, throughout the development of the national industry standards, and I suspect this is absolutely true today as it was when they were established, that housing counseling is a vital and critical service that we need to ensure customers and communities have access to. And to the degree that your office, NeighborWorks, and others can provide resources to those counselors on the front lines responding to community needs, I think this is just one way we can do that. And I will just say, formerly being a housing counselor many, many years ago, I just want to give a giant shout out to all the housing counselors across the country. Thank you for the work you do. If not, but for your work, I think we would see a lot more impact, more people losing their homes or unable to achieve their dream of homeownership, keep their homes. So thank you for all that you do every day to fortify communities, and you're just so important. But David, tell me,
Marietta, I just want to say well said, and ditto to just express my appreciation for all of the wonderful work that counselors do, and frankly, all the professional staff of the agencies, because it's not limited to counselor. Everyone has a role today. Thank you for all that you do. I'm sorry, Marietta, go ahead.
No, I appreciate your shout out too. We can't listen. I think housing counselors across the country are unsung heroes. So the more that we can give them a pat on the back and our appreciation, so I welcome it. I guess I would say, what naturally comes to me after this is, so what does success look like today? What does it look like for the national industry standards? And I think refining them, modernize them, educating consumers. It's important that we continue to invest in this infrastructure to do so. And the modernization of the national industry standards is an important opportunity for us to work together with the support of stakeholders to support that housing counselors have access to the training and tools and skills and resources they need to deliver the highest quality of services to meet, frankly, some very complex issues that are happening, rising interest rates, and lack of inventory and other things. So again, thank you for the collaboration and the partnership. I look forward to what potentially will come in the future. And we're just incredibly grateful to be part of this conversation and continuing to refine this really important resource.
So, Marietta, thank you. So, to paraphrase, I mean, I'm thinking that you're sort of asking, why is now the right time to update the standards? Is that a fair statement?
I think that is, like, why now? Like, what's changed?
Yeah. So I think, I've spoken with many leaders in our housing counseling community. And of course, like you, I've spent too many years that I want to talk about working in the vineyards with everyone in this space. I'm very proud of it, though. I don't mean to minimize it. And when I became the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Housing Counseling, I had a number of goals. Of course, certification was a priority when I became the Deputy Assistant Secretary, but my vision and goals for the role of the profession and for the housing counseling community are much larger than that. As you know, we've established our goal to reach a much larger population of consumers. But the real way to do that is to work in partnership with all the public sector on a state and local level, as well as the private sector at all levels. And I do believe that the credentialing that certification has brought to our industry, the fact that our counselors are, I'll describe it as licensed, similar to other industries, is really a game changer. And I do believe that this is our moment in time that we can leverage that. I look at all of the fee-for-service that is happening, and it's nowhere near the scale that it could be. But whether it's pre-purchase or post-purchase or reverse mortgage counseling, work and credit counseling, there's so much opportunity for growth there. But it needs to be hand in hand with our stakeholders, all of the industry partners who will be inviting into this, what I'll describe as an inclusive process. So second as well, I think we need to really address the reality that we are in a very diverse industry, working in diverse markets as a whole. And Marietta, you have been a voice for that issue, and I want to commend you for it. But this is an area that the housing counseling community writ large is really making a difference, providing culturally sensitive and linguistically appropriate housing counseling services. And to paraphrase many, such as Marcia Griffin in our community and Lot Diaz, this is a business opportunity for the private sector to work with us. Again, a best practice discussion, but also an opportunity for growth so that we can bridge the home ownership gap and break down the barriers that have existed for diverse communities in our marketplace for decades. So my hope is that we're going to position agencies for success so that, as you often describe in the Achieving Excellence program, thank you, I benefited from that personally in Achieving Excellence, so that we all can become social enterprises, how we approach our work in housing counseling. And then last as well, I think there's a lot of opportunity to expand housing counseling through federal and state programs, as well as working with the government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie and Freddie, and state housing finance agencies. And I think that there's a role here for that discussion as we move on to update the best practices. So those are my thoughts. And, Marietta, before I invite Shauna to come on to do the Mentimeter to engage with our audience, any final words that you'd like to share with the group?
No, I would just say we really want to make sure that the standards are appropriate, regardless of size of agency, small and big. And so do provide us feedback. We're anxious for that. And I agree with you. I think there is an opportunity here. I hope this is our moment. We've been talking in an industry about a standardized fee for service for a very long time. And I really hope we can work together to really capitalize on this moment. I dream of the day that we don't have to have the conversation about what the value proposition is, that we've moved past that to more substantive conversations. So again, thank you for everything you and your team do, and a huge shout out to all the housing counselors on the line.
Thank you, Marietta. And as I hand things off to Shauna for Mentimeter, I want to share with all of you that working with ICF, this is going to be an extremely inclusive and engaging process as we move forward. And we invite everyone to join with us at NeighborWorks to facilitate what will be a holistic update to the standards. Now, I didn't want to give too many examples of those standards and our goals, because that's what we want to hear from you now. So Shauna, I'm going to turn it over to you and sign off and just listen to the balance of the conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thanks so much, David and Marietta. And I do want you to go back to the slide for a second, Taylor, because we received some questions about the work that we'll be doing. And David and Marietta didn't talk about like our entire scope of work, but we are a technical assistance provider. We've been working with this office for a number of years. We also work across other HUD programs, and there's so many HUD programs like Home, the Community Development Block Grant, and others that fund your agencies for housing counseling, as well as housing authorities, et cetera. So we want to bring everyone into the fold. And as David said, this inclusive process. So while we are doing the first of any feedback sessions today, and I do want you to go ahead and use the login so that I know that you're ready, because Mentimeter is open, and then we can go into the first question. But I do want to let you know that there's a lot of meetings. There's also a gaps analysis that we're going to do to make sure we're looking at the entire waterfront around these standards. There will be stakeholder engagement that you might hear about in the future that overlaps with the work that you're doing. There will be an advisory committee that is formed for this particular update. And then we will, as David said, include obviously the National Federal Advisory, Housing Counseling Federal Advisory Committee. So there's a lot of pieces and there's a lot of work behind this particular phase. And then later there'll be additional phases just for these standards. So, so you can go to Mentimeter, and if you're just joining us now, Mentimeter is just a separate website. You can also use it on your phone, and I pasted in the two options. So you just click on the link that I have here, and then the other option is to go to menti.com and put in the passcode 2866. 1445, and that's just menti.com. So so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's make sure we got a good audience here that can give us feedback. And the first question is really, okay, up over 100, perfect. And we've got 30 minutes to grab your feedback. And some of the questions are open-ended, some are quick. And I do want to make sure that Taylor comes on as well. So we want to make sure that we get enough of you working in Mentimeter to make this a good feedback session. And remember, some of you started with the day telling us, were you part of a HUD intermediary, maybe your local housing counseling agency? This is the database behind this, so we'll be able to make sure we're matching your answers to the type of agency you are. So, so hopefully that helps those of you trying to get into Mentimeter. Hopefully that helps there. So I think you can move us ahead, Taylor. And then Taylor and I are just going to, talk through these questions with you. So we want to know first, like, what type of housing counseling services you provide. This first phase is going to be about pre-purchase and homebuyer education, which includes post-purchase and foreclosure prevention, of course. But we want to get a sense as to, what kind of services do you provide? And I want you to be thinking in the pre-purchase, home buying, home ownership space before we get to those questions, because we really want you to dig in terms of what you think the standards need to be updated, what they're missing, et cetera. And certainly you can chat with us in the box if you want, but if you want to be part of the feedback session, it's going to be really important that you log into Mentimeter, and we've given you that link. I will paste it again, make sure it's right at the top. And then the other thing I also wanted to grab is that at least somebody had mentioned that they wanted to be reminded about what was in the standards. So hopefully most of you saw this, but we have launched a preliminary website with all of the information you need to know in terms of the, like, what are the standards and the things that Marietta and David talked through. But this is really going to be your best resource if you need to have something open for when we ask you later what topics are missing or what needs to be updated, given the number of years from the last time that it was updated. So we're getting excellent returns here. Taylor, what are you seeing? We're almost up to 300 folks have told us what type of services that they provide.
Yeah, it looks like, I mean, there's a lot of people who provide pre-purchase services and financial education and capability services, but we do have close numbers in default and foreclosure prevention, post-purchase, and there's some people that provide rental services, and we have a group of people here that are also doing reverse mortgage. So it looks like people are still filling numbers in. So go ahead and put in your answers. You may be able to, Shauna, I think you can put in multiples if you provide more than one. So
absolutely. We
this
know
is really helpful feedback.
Are doing a lot of your different services as well. So a couple folks here in the chat box are still looking for Mentimeter, so I'm just answering all of those. And if you do have questions about the national standards, just hold off in terms of the Q&A box. We have an open-ended question that you can just ask anything. What are your questions about the updates? And I know just for our NeighborWorks folks that are on the line, there's a lot of questions about the intermingling of NeighborWorks courses, your own certifications, things like that. So you'll be able to see those later when we give you the outputs for some of this, but we're really talking about the national industry standards across the country. And again, we mentioned before that NeighborWorks is at the table just like they were before, but there's other voices that were included then. As of now, like, this is going to be something that it's going to be separate and independent from what was happening before. Okay, so so appreciate that. So I think we can move ahead. I think we have a good sense. We have about 530 people, so I'm hoping we get more folks to answer the questions that we really need to know, because we only see 300 here. So please help us out on the next question. And I'll have Taylor pull this up. We also want to know how familiar you are with the standards. So are you somewhat familiar? Are you brand new to the industry? Are you somewhat, aware of them, not certain? And that's okay if you are uncertain or not sure. That's okay. And being brand new to the industry, that's also okay too. So you don't need to have been an expert on the entire national industry standards before coming here. But if you are looking at the resource that I posted, there is a section that talks about the core areas, the topics. You might want to take a quick look at that.
Yeah, and I think the different perspectives are super important here. So whether you're new or you're, maybe a more seasoned housing counselor, I think all the perspectives are really valued in this feedback gathering, simply because, these are going to be the standards that, going forward are going to help people who are coming in and may be new. So they might be in your position in, in a couple of years, or maybe you've been able to see all the transformations, through the industry, and maybe, you have some ideas about, what needs to be added or how it can help you provide services for your clients. So no matter how seasoned you are or how new you are, your voice is definitely valued here. And we really appreciate this feedback that's coming in.
So I'm very happy to see that a lot of folks are very familiar, Taylor, and there's a fair number that are also somewhat aware of these standards. And again, these are independent standards outside of what you may be taking in terms of obviously the HUD certification, as we mentioned. as well as other certification that might be available in the industry, including NeighborWorks. So these are independent, standalone, and as we talked about, really best practices for a certain framework for delivering housing counseling, documentation that needs to be kept, goes beyond also what's in the HUD handbook. So, okay, great. All right, I just want to get a couple more answers because we're really going to start diving into the open-ended topics, and we really do need to make sure that we've got folks ready to answer those. So thanks so much for logging into Mentimeter. It really helps. Okay, great. All right, we have somebody here from Nigeria. So welcome, Daniel. So maybe you're under contract to one of NeighborWorks partners. So we also think that it'd be helpful to find out like how your agency is using the standards. And so this is similar to when we asked about the services. Do you use them to train new counselors? Do you look at it as promoting a quality of service and that you're really proud of using these standards when you're talking to funders that might be funding your organization, your clients, your partners? Do you include the agency, the industry standards in your policies and procedures, including record keeping, reporting? Maybe you're using it as part of your own development of criteria. Okay, it looks like overwhelmingly the smaller categories here, Taylor, are other uses, which we'll talk about, and then the don't use currently. Okay, but most of the folks coming in say they use it for new training of counselors, promoting quality services, including in policies and procedures, and when they develop their own curriculum, so their own home buyer education, it sounds like. This is a very important piece of feedback so that we understand how you're using the standard. And we're very interested in understanding the other uses. If you can let us know that, that would be very, very helpful.
You'll also have an opportunity to put that information in Mentimeter going forward. There are some open-ended questions where if you do have other uses, you can let us know, and we'll take that feedback.
Yeah, I was triple checking our questions. I think that was because of we had to shrink things up, Taylor. I think actually they could chat in with us about their other uses. I think I would like that to happen. You can either use the Q&A box or the chat box because the next one is about the topics. So if they use it for another purpose, let's find out what that is now. Okay. I think that would be really helpful. Now we're up to 40%. Okay, the existing standards, I'm going to go ahead and provide this link again. I put it in the chat box too. And then, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just as a reminder, I see a couple questions coming in about what are the specific changes that are going to be made to the standards. This is a session to basically get that feedback from you guys on what standards you feel like, or what updates you feel like should be in the standards. So it's not this is going to be, like David said, a really inclusive process where we wanted to talk to you guys at the top of this process and understand what you believe would help you in your work and what you believe needs to be added. So we're trying to gauge what those specific changes will be based on what you all need. So it's basically, we're trying to meet the needs that you have and that your clients have. And so this is all what this session is about, is gaining that information on what you all think are the specific changes that need to be made.
I really appreciate that, calling that out from the Q&A box, Taylor. That is really important because I mentioned before, like, what are the next steps? This is part of that gaps analysis. This is part of the stakeholder feedback. And we thought this would be a great opportunity, unique opportunity to hear directly from you in terms of what's missing. So, okay. So I think we're getting close to that 300. And thanks, Marcus, so much for including personal development. And it looks like Sandy is using it for design workshops potentially. So, why don't we go ahead and move ahead to the first open-ended question, Taylor. So we really want to know what topics that you think should be updated or added specifically to pre-purchase. homebuyer education and counseling. So what is missing? And we heard from before, like David mentioned modernization and some changes that have been made in the industry since these were updated last time. So this is a word cloud. And so what happens with the word cloud, and we haven't used one yet in the conference that I am aware of so far, but we should see if it's multiple answers of the same phrase or word, it'll get bigger and bigger. And we thought this, so I shouldn't have said it was open. It's kind of open-ended, but then we're going to ask you to explain more about these topics. So if you feel a little shortchanged at the moment, we will give you some more time. So I feel like what I'm seeing so far, it looks like interactive and credit. And the word modernization, which is fine, but we want to know what you mean by modernization. So we'll ask you the open-ended one before.
Yeah, I see estate planning. Multiple people have put that in. Manufactured housing. And this is the word cloud is really cool because then you get to see, you know, there might be some like-minded common thoughts going around. So it's interesting to see. You might not be the only one thinking that this is a need or something that needs to be added.
Right. And we're really not that all of this feedback, it's all really important. I know it's getting really small and you probably want to get up really close. We're also looking for some things that are common. I am seeing manufactured housing pretty large here and estate planning in particular. That's really, really large at the moment. Taylor, what are you seeing?
There's affordability. I feel like budgeting has been getting bigger as it came in. Before it was a little smaller. So there's some folks putting that in. Insurance. Yeah, budgeting's getting larger.
Yeah, we are going to blow up Mentimeter with this word cloud. It's going to be so many different things. So we want everyone to continue to write in. And then those of you that already have submitted what needs to be updated or what needs to be added, then we are going to move to the next one in terms of like, tell us more about this topic that you think needs to be added or updated. And so that'll take the most amount of time for you folks to respond. I am definitely seeing insurance quite large here, quite large.
Wealth building is becoming bigger as well. Appraisal.
Yeah. I'm seeing also wealth building as well. So I'm also seeing manufactured, but just written a little bit differently.
Yeah, there's different iterations of, you know, the same answer. So that'll be helpful too.
I'm seeing down payment assistance. Again, I'm sure many of you would like to, again, have some connection of the industry standards to other HUD pieces of financing that can be used for soft second mortgages and things like that, like home and CDBG or the disaster recovery programs that we're seeing a lot of. So, so down payment assistance and other things would be helpful. Okay. Well, I'm wondering, Taylor, if we give this maybe like another 30 seconds. Can you tell it's the end of our first day of the conference? Maybe another 30 seconds. So we're going to move on to the open-ended. Oh, it like stopped. You didn't stop it, right? Okay.
Let's keep going. I also see some folks in the chat. I think this is in regard to this question. Underwriting tips came up, so that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Interest rates are becoming bigger on the Mentimeter as well.
There's also like different standards around underwriting that have happened over the last several years that in terms of front end and back end ratios and things like that. So I'm not surprised to see that at all. Okay. Okay. All right. And thanks, Letitia, for combating appraisal bias into the Q&A box. Hopefully you're seeing appraisal bias here, or at least appraisals. as well. That is something that we keep hearing would be really helpful to cover in the standards. Okay, let's move ahead to the open-ended one. So in this open-ended one, we'd like you to take those top topics. So those of you that wrote manufactured, those of you that wrote insurance, those of you that wrote credit, those of you that wrote appraisal, we really would like to have you write, and I think this is like a Twitter/X, like character limit. I think it's like 250 characters, but you should be able to write in boxes like phrases as to what you mean in terms of your responses. We want more than just one word. So please take your time to answer, because we already did the word cloud. So we'd like to know more about insurance. We want to know more about manufactured housing. We want to know more about when somebody says appraisal, like what specifically is missing. And you should have at least 3, 4, 5, 6 lines would be really helpful. And as we see some of the responses come in, I just want to make sure that folks that have written in about, again, what's the difference with the national industry standards? It's not the same as the handbook. It's not the same as the certification, but they're meant to kind of all sing together and be a fuller package like David covered earlier. So the handbook are the requirements for the HUD housing counseling program. The standards are the best practices and the service delivery and recommended, like detailed documentation and things like that. So hopefully that helps with some of those. Okay, what are we seeing here? Thanks, Taylor, for dropping that again.
Yeah.
HOAs, so homeownership associations, and those fees is what I would assume that's what somebody meant by HOA. So thanks for that feedback.
It looks like in regards to insurance, the need to break it down and explain why they need it and types of coverage. It's one of the inputs here. Folks are talking about credit, so the new intricacies in credit scores, including how to boost and using utilities and rental history to improve their credit. So kind of utilizing those monthly payments that they make on a regular basis to improve their scores is what we're seeing here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And keep it scrolling if you can. I think you have to hit enter so it scrolls. So manufactured housing, both kind of taking a deep dive. I think you just hit enter, like on your, there you go. And then it'll go back to the top.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a little bit, flowing grid is a little different. I think we started the day with Julia mentioning manufactured housing. So it's come up a couple times, right?
Yep.
Okay, successor and interests. Bunch of resources for down payment assistance.
Lots of things related to credit and improving credit, helping folks build their credit. It's a common interest here.
I saw inspections and kind of understanding inspections a little bit more. So there's many different inspections, as we all know. So adding to those in the standards would be helpful. Okay. Oh, title. Somebody wrote title insurance. Understand the ins and outs of that. Okay. It looks like HUD is happy with what they're seeing so far in terms of seeing all the ideas flowing in. Just wanted to give them a shout out. Wills and trusts and other things related to ownership. There's a lot of different types of trusts out there. There's also just a lot of ownership options depending upon the state. Oh, rehabilitation. Somebody had already written in about rehabilitation and rehab loans. Inherited homes. Oh, flood insurance as well as limitations. Okay, we have at least 242 responses so far. And we only opened this up just a little bit ago. I think we started this at 5:15. Non-traditional credit financing for immigrants and refugees. Whoever wrote that, tell us more. I know there are different ways of financing and different aspects of that. So definitely take a deep dive. I think it was National Capacity did a webinar that talked about different financing done among Asian groups as well that may be a little different. So would love to hear more about that.
Been some things coming in for home repairs and maintenance. Been seeing a couple of entries on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Lots of great feedback. Lots of great responses. Just want to make sure that buzzing didn't mean that I was needing to address something. So yeah, lots of folks calling out flood insurance. So leveraging Section 8 vouchers. So again, leveraging sort of other HUD programs and kind of bringing them in terms of how that works. Zombie mortgages. We actually have a piece around zombie mortgages that CFPB collaborated with us. So understanding different mortgages out there, different scam mortgages, unfortunately. So thanks for whoever wrote that in. Tiny homes. I'm seeing both do not rent to own, but also contract for deed as well. So what does it mean to actually like own? What are heirs properties? I saw that earlier.
Put a couple things on student loan education and how to kind of factor that into your home ownership goals. Estate planning, life estates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, land contracts versus mortgages. Okay, I'm going to let this go for another minute, and then we're going to catch up in the Q&A box, and we are also going to have the last open-ended. We are suppressing the answers, but you can go ahead and just move on to that one if you would like. So hopefully we've been able to give you folks enough time to give us feedback, but we purposely hit the results because we want to capture all the questions that you have about the national standards. And if we can focus on exactly the national standards, that would be really helpful. And so that is not the same thing as NeighborWorks and how they're operating, which I think folks wrote in about. So in terms of their own programs, we really don't want to get ahead of what they might be planning. We want this to be across all of everyone's programming out there. So please go ahead and provide some results. And I think we can just leave that up and we can see the number that comes in. I'm just going to catch up a little bit here with the Q&A. So thanks for whoever wrote in, and I'm just going to see what we have here. Okay, I think a couple of folks wrote in here related to some of the topics. So I'm going to dismiss those. And then, okay, and then just to underscore about these changes. So the National Industry Standards hasn't been updated in several years, and that includes the HUD Office of Housing Counseling hadn't been formed yet, and also the certification that HUD offers. So HUD's certification. So, and then there is an updated handbook. So all of this is going to go together. So hopefully we've addressed that. So we're looking for you to tell us what changes need to be made to the standard. So, Yeah, and thanks for understanding that we're going to keep these results hidden about the questions on the next steps. We really just want to make sure that we get all questions about your next steps and kind of understand the process. We said we're going to do gaps analysis, which includes these stakeholder meetings. There's going to be other stakeholder meetings. There's going to be a National Industry Standards Advisory Committee that's going to take a look at what folks had recommended. We're trying to filter, going wide and then filter down to what updates need to be made. So, so that's why. So let me see if there's anything else that I think that we can answer, Taylor. Okay, in terms of sending the answers, I will commit, and thank you, Tracy, for asking that question. We will commit to checking with HUD to see if all of the if some of the feedback in Mentimeter can be spliced into this final PowerPoint when we post an updated version online. Let's see what their comfort level is with some of the feedback. And also we have our page, as we mentioned, which I will go ahead and paste the page again that we have on the HUD Exchange that I pasted when David and Marietta were talking. I would say that there will be some updates to this page. This might be the best place to check back in terms of where we are with the standards work. So thanks for that question. So in terms of us trying to have a transparent process, which is what David had committed to. So I don't think I'm looking at these other questions, Taylor, that came in the Q&A box, and I think they came in earlier. I would just say that anyone who typed in some questions, or not questions, comments earlier about what's missing, I think we have everything that you provided at that time. So, okay, great. Well, I know this is like a couple minutes before the end of our session. Is there anything else, Taylor, that you want to comment on related to what we're capturing here?
No, I don't think so. But we really appreciate any questions you have about the next steps. Looks like we have about 50 responses so far. So if you have any other questions about it, just make sure to get those in so that we can make sure that, we give these to HUD and kind of analyze them and see what's all on your mind related to the national industry standards.
Can you go ahead and just show the NIS page? That I think that might be helpful.
Sure.
And just to make sure that folks, if they want to check back with us, what it'll say.
Yeah, so this is going to be the National Industry Standards Update Process page on the HUD Exchange. You'll see that we have an overview and we kind of cover what are the national industry standards, why we're looking to update the standards, and then how would the standards be updated. This information is coming soon on the website, but we did give you all a little sneak peek on the PowerPoint presentation. So like Shauna mentioned, there is that collection of feedback today. There's going to be stakeholder meetings and other steps along the way to update the process. So you do have a little bit of information on that in the PowerPoint slide. And then if you want to learn more, we suggested people register for the conference. So you are here, you're able to kind of get that understanding from David and Marietta about the history and kind of like how these things intertwine with, the updates in the industry. And then as far as the update status, it is kicking off in September. So here we are at the conference. There are other milestones that we mentioned on the PowerPoint that will be taking place this month and throughout the end of the year.
Thank you for that impromptu demo. I really appreciate it. And we can go ahead and close out and welcome folks back in the morning, not morning, at the middle of the day for Eastern, morning if you're West Coast, for tomorrow. But thanks for a great day, and I echo David's feedback. Thank you so much for your terrific feedback today. This is really, really helpful. And this is just the beginning of the process.
Sounds good. I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure, we'll go back to Mentimeter very quickly. If any of you all are still in there, please join. This is where we will gather feedback for day one. So please let us know what your feedback for day one is. What's today helpful and you can't wait for day two? We hope that's the case. Tomorrow's sessions look interesting and you'll be back. We really encourage everyone to be, return tomorrow. We have a great agenda for tomorrow. Lots of sessions going on tomorrow and through Thursday as well. And then there is an option here to say, I have to miss tomorrow, but look forward to the recordings. We understand you guys are very busy and you do some of the most important work there is. So if you can't join tomorrow, that is okay. We'll have the recordings available after the conference. You can also join in on 6 Connect if you're not able to join on the session, but you want to give some feedback or you have some resources you want to share for the discussion boards. We encourage that as well. So it looks like most people are excited. Today was helpful. They can't wait for day two. We can't wait for day two either. So I will leave this up in the background if you want to keep putting in your answers, but I'll cover some closing slides. Just, I know that it's 5:30, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So tomorrow, looking ahead for day two, we're going to have an opening session in the morning. There was a slight tweak to the agenda. So here you see powerful partnerships, but Commissioner Gordon and David covered that earlier this morning. And we're going to move to David's Corner tomorrow. So if you have any questions for David, we're going to have an open Q&A where you can ask David what's on the top of your mind. And we also have a discussion board accompanying David's Corner. So if you have any burning questions or thoughts you want to put down in 6 Connect, you can also do that as well. Then later in the day, we'll have the latest updates in advancing equitable lending. Following that session, we'll be here to talk about MSIs and HBCUs, so modeling HCA higher education partnerships. And then we have a couple of concurrent sessions. So at 3:30 to 4:30, we'll be covering leveling up your housing counseling program at the same time as creating effective intermediary and affiliate relationships. So you get to choose, similar to today, you get to choose which ones you want to go to. And then ending the day, we'll have a session about after the storm, housing counselors responding to disasters. And the spotlight on rental housing counseling long-term lessons. So we will have a full agenda for tomorrow. As always, you can stay connected. You can visit the 2023 conference website where you can get all the information related to the conference. You can continue the conversation on 6 Connect. And then you also have some resources here on the HUD Exchange, emailing HUD, and don't forget to subscribe to the Housing Counseling Today blog, where Shauna did mention that piece that is coming, and other pieces that will be coming throughout the end of the year related to the industry and housing counseling. And that will be it for today, folks. So thank you for attending. The Mentimeter is still up for feedback. So if you want to put that in, I'll leave it open for just a couple more minutes, but we are done for the day. And we hope that you come back tomorrow. Thank you.